Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading White Women Get Ready, How Healing Post-Traumatic Mistress Syndrome Leads to Anti-Racist Change by Amanda K. Gross. This is a book that I am reading a little bit of every day for my own process of deconstructing the delusion of white supremacy, and if you would like to join me, you can get copies attached here. This is called Deconstructing Family. The file reads, feelings, flattered, giddy energy, honored to be claimed by her in this way. Older black woman who she lives with, who's her mentor, had just called her daughter. I felt chosen, loved, and seen, but also strangeness, a sense of unknown, discomfort. What did this mean for our relationship? Especially, what did it mean for me and my responsibilities to her? Was it an upgrade? Had it come with new expectations? It felt precious, like something I never could have fathomed would exist. But now I know it could, and it does. I had become aware of the possibility of losing it. I too have harbored an idealistic view of family. Unlike the one that conservatives imagine, though, the picture in my mind does not resemble the household in which I grew up, with one mother, one father, 2 children, a boy and a girl, plus a dog. In my dreams, it doesn't live within a fenced-in yard. Instead, I envision a thriving ecosystem of interconnectedness in which I feel emotionally safe and I belong. Within that sense of family, I feel connection. I am taken care of while taking care of others. When I dream of family, I feel a sense of community, intentionality, mutual availability, collaboration, and interdependence. I was first exposed to the term chosen family in the context of queer community, with friends who had faced distancing, abandonment, and excommunication from their families of origin, and whose cultivation of chosen family centered the values of healthy love and self-determination. Much of what I've learned about navigating consent, relational communications, and boundaries comes from the work of radical queer communities, including strategies to prevent, address, and break cycles of child abuse. As someone who's often felt like a misfit in my birth family, as someone who has yearned for deep, honest intimacy, and as someone who has been in and out of other people's families, as exchange student and nanny, chosen family was a concept I embraced wholeheartedly. And as I mentioned before, my idealism has also been influenced by a Mennonite subculture in which family overlaps and overflows into every sphere of one's life. Our emerging chosen family dynamic overlapped and overflowed in all of those ways. Felicia became mother/auntie/mentor/teacher/sister/friend during a disorienting time. As someone who had been nurtured by strong black women throughout my life, I knew the script of following her lead, valuing her lessons, and gratefully receiving her care. The anti-racist spaces we were organizing in constantly reinforced the notion of following black leadership and listening to black women, which felt comfortingly familiar to me. Yet at the same time, I wonder how within the occasion of our living arrangement, I may have begun to conflate the idea of family with that of the household, one that historian Elizabeth Fox Genovese explicitly differentiates in the book Within the Plantation Household. Fox Genovese intentionally uses the term household to describe a basic social unit in which people, whether voluntarily or under compulsion, pool their income and resources. Conceptualizing household in this way allows for an acknowledgement of differences in power that the warm fuzzies of using the term family might conceal. Household, Fox Genovese continues, has no necessary relation to family, although members of households may be related, and many households may be coterminous with family memberships. I can see how my assumption and expectations of deep familial relationships in living arrangements are connected to the convenient amnesia of power for white members of the plantation household. A sentimentalizing of relationship that ignores the reality that constructed the household in the first place. Or to flip that sentiment, as Painter points out, hierarchy by no means precludes attachment. Just as enslaved youngsters attached to the adults closest to them, white as well as black, So the white children and adults in slave-owning households became psychologically entangled with the enslaved people they came to know well. And having been raised in part by a Black woman, Ms. Sylvia, I find these considerations of the plantation household particularly relevant to my mistress syndrome. Occasionally, Ms. Sylvia put down firm boundaries, more so with me after my little brother was born. But I mostly remember her as lenient, generous, and very clear about certain protocols. She would never eat my family's food and always left a room cleaner than she entered. I also remember hours and hours of story time, playing outside, and day trips to neighborhood spots within walking distance because she never learned to drive. It was Miss Sylvia who would take us up the block to the corner store where Mr. Williams chain smoked behind the counter and the rickety aisles bulged with plastic-covered treats. She would spend her paycheck on goodies we were not allowed to eat at home, then advise us not to tell our mother. Somehow, Mom always found out. Though there were many other and much better educated Black women who would become my teachers, Ms. Sylvia was the first to foster my love of books. There's a photo of the two of us that I hold very dear. In it, she's reading The Real Mother Goose to me on the questionably hued beige living room couch. With its black and white checkered back cover, the book is as big as me, but you can still see my fresh, paunchy cheeks poking over the top. My wide blue eyes fixate on the page as she supports my wobbly little frame. I remember, as well, a moment when my sense of her began to change. If I were to pull out that folder today, it would smell slightly of shame, although it didn't at the time. I must have been 7 or so. Thanks in no small part to Ms. Sylvia's patient hours of story time, I whizzed through the reading levels at school and had read practically all the books in the school's library. I found the library's chapter books at the beginning of 2nd grade, which is when my written vocabulary really took off. I remember Ms. Sylvia reading one particular book aloud, if not to me, then to my brother. I remember a rupture in the cozy moment as she unexpectedly stumbled over a word, one I knew from school. I noticed her stumble with it and was taken aback and a bit confused. Weren't adults supposed to know these things? Of course, this wasn't the only moment that encouraged feelings of paternalism toward Ms. Sylvia. There were snippets of the conversations between my parents I overheard while they discussed loaning her money. Countering the positive reinforcement of examples of well-educated, institutionally powerful Black women who ran the classrooms of my life was the classist negative stereotype of poor Black neighborhoods that pervaded the local news hour, and my mother's reminders to lock the doors and her admonishment of my father to take the back way to avoid the projects. If someone were to give Ms. Sylvia a ride home at night to the much poorer, much Blacker neighborhood barely 3 miles from my family's home, it would most surely be my father, and we would not have accompanied him. As I grew older, the distance between Ms. Sylvia and I grew, too. No longer a constant presence in my life, the opportunities for interaction revolved around my family and me supporting her. My mother gets credit for doing the work of maintaining the relationship. She made sure that we would visit and bring a gift on birthdays and holidays. As a teenager, those interactions were an uncomfortable obligation. But as I got older and began to unpack my own stuff, I began to more deeply appreciate all that Ms. Sylvia had been and done in my life. At this point, my life was mostly far from Atlanta, but whenever I traveled, I sent her postcards, ending each one writing that I loved and appreciated her. Once, when I was back in town, my mom asked if I could take Ms. Sylvia to a doctor's appointment. It was a rare moment of what I felt like rekindled intimacy. She shared about her health problems. I shared about my school problems. Then a few years before she passed, we began to talk on the phone. That Ms. Sylvia had input in my most formative years meant I had opportunities to understand whiteness in ways many white children have not. I'm gonna skip a little bit. The years I had of navigating relationship with Felicia as yoga teacher / mentor / advisor / co-conspirator / co-facilitator / supervisor / housemate / older sister / neighbor / friend has meant that I have had intimate access to the harmful impacts of racism and impacts of my racism on someone I love. Check out White women get ready.